Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome to our live webinar, No Participation Without Protection, Women's Rights in Areas Controlled by Armed and Political Movements, organized by Fight for Humanity and Berghof Foundation, with support from the German Federal Foreign Office. My name is Véronique Dudouet. I'm a senior advisor at the Berghof Foundation, and I've been given the great privilege to moderate this online event today. Before we begin the session, I have a few technical points to go over. Firstly, to say that this talk will be simultaneously interpreted into Burmese and Arabic. If you want to listen in English, please select the English channel on the bottom of your screen, especially as one of the panelists will be speaking in Arabic. Similarly, for listening to this webinar in Burmese and Arabic, you should look for the right interpretation channel on the bottom of your screen and click on Arabic or on German for Burmese, since we didn't find a Burmese button. For the webinar, we have enabled the live Q&A feature through which participants can ask content-related questions or technical questions. You can find the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And you can ask your questions by typing into the Q&A box. You can type up questions anytime during this webinar, and the technical questions will be answered in writing. In the last half an hour or so, we will have a Q&A session during which the panelists will address the questions that will have been posted by the participants, which I will summarize and direct to them. We might not have time to go into all of the questions, but we'll try to address and answer as many of them as possible. If you want to watch this again or inform your friends, your colleagues about this webinar who could not be with us today, we will record the event and it will be accessible in a few days via our website. So today we aim to present some research findings and to host a panel discussion on the topic of women's rights in areas affected or controlled by armed and political movements. On November 25th, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women marks the beginning of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which every year promotes activities to raise the awareness and call for further action for the prevention and elimination of gender-based violence. Within the framework of those 16 days of activism and in relation to the International Human Rights Day, which is on December 10th, we are organizing this online event to draw the attention to the current situation, the progress, the difficulties, the challenges, and the prospects of women's rights in areas under the control of non-state armed groups, or what we prefer to call armed and political movements. Between 70 and 80 million women and girls are estimated to live in areas controlled or influenced by those movements around the world, often in contexts of ongoing armed conflict. Given the absence of the state in many of those regions, it is the responsibility of armed and political movements to promote and protect the rights of women and girls in their territories. However, these actors are often not considered as stakeholders, as duty bearers by the policy community that works on the Women, Peace and Security agenda since the UN Resolution 1325 in 2000. Initially designed for UN member states, the application of the WPS agenda needs to be improved for conflict areas that are governed by those actors. So in this context, today's event will present some key findings from a policy research project which we have conducted together by the Berghof Foundation and Fight for Humanity, with support from the German Foreign Office, on the role specifically of two armed and political movements in Myanmar, the Karen National Union and the Karenni National Progressive Party, in implementing the WPS agenda, with particular focus on the two pillars of protection and participation. So to discuss this with us today, we will have Beytul, who's our colleague from Fight for Humanity. We will have Zin Mar Phyo, who's our local researcher on Myanmar. We will have Sabe Phyu, who's a Burmese women's rights activist, and we will have Dr. Najwa Fadhl providing a comparative perspective from Yemen. But first, I would like to give the floor to Danielle Feldstein, who's desk officer for Women, Peace and Security at the German Federal Foreign Office, for some opening remarks. Danielle, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Véronique. Dear colleagues, experts, everybody who came today together to listen to this wonderful event. It is my great pleasure to welcome you in the name of the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs for this event hosted by the formidable Berghof Foundation and Fight for Humanity. And as Véronique pointed out, funded by the German Foreign Office. I was asked to give you a brief introduction to the Women, Peace and Security agenda and what it means to the government of Germany. I promise to be very brief so that you can hear more from the experts that you came here for today. To put it very briefly, the Women, Peace and Security agenda is of utmost political priority to the German government in general. We take a whole of government approach, but also in particular to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It will be a cornerstone of our new feminist foreign policy, which will seek to strengthen really what we've been doing. So to strengthen gender mainstreaming in all aspects of our feminist foreign policy, in all of our actions. And I don't think I need to convince anyone here today that to build stable and peaceful societies for all actually need to be able to participate fully, equally, and meaningfully in the building process of such societies. And of course, it also means that not only women in all their diversity, but also marginalized groups and all those who generally are discriminated against, who are sidelined in any way or excluded from political decision-making and peace processes. So we take a very inclusive and holistic approach to participation and peace processes in general. What does it mean concretely? We make it a priority to support both politically and financially projects and initiatives that focus on WPS, on related topics such as conflict-related sexual violence, on the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all their diversity, and the participation of marginalized groups, the protection of women in all contexts, their empowerment, their agency really, and really, we want to aim at ensuring the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights for all genders and all components of any given society. That means we support projects that have at the very least, a very strong gender perspective, and ideally take an actual gender transformative approach. We are very excited about the project that Berghof Foundation and Fight for Humanity have come in a very short amount of time. We are very happy to announce that we will be supporting the follow-up project that builds on the findings from this year. And we're very excited to see what will be done with this next year as well. So without any further ado, I give the word back to, I assume, Véronique, and thank you everyone for coming.
Great. Many thanks, Danielle, for your pointers into your policy and for your support for this work. So we will now turn to the first part of our panel discussion, which will focus on the research findings in Myanmar and more generally a discussion on identified areas of progress and remaining challenges to promote women's participation and protection rights in the midst of armed conflicts and during peace processes in Myanmar and in Yemen. We will first hear from Beytul Gorkem, who is the head of operations at Fight for Humanity, and you will find also some short bios into the chat. So maybe Beytul, I will directly turn to you. Could you give us a brief introduction to the background to the project? Thank you.
Thank you, Véronique, and I will try to be short. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. This project called Observe and Act, the role of armed and political movements in the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1325, is a joint 6-month project, as Véronique mentioned, and developed by Berghof Foundation and Fight for Humanity and supported by the German Federal Foreign Office. The project grew out of some previous work together, such as a webinar in November 2020 on the promotion of the rights of women and girls in conflict settings from the perspectives of women in leadership roles in territories of armed and political movements in Yemen, in Syria, Colombia, and Myanmar. Following this webinar, we developed the idea of an in-depth research to assess and promote efforts to enhance the rights of women and girls in areas under the control of armed and political movements. It's estimated that 150 million people live in areas controlled or influenced by armed and political movement, and 50% of whom are women and girls. So this is so it's very important. In 2021, with students from the Graduate Institute of Geneva, we conducted an initial research project and looked into which armed and political movements had made declarations and or adopted internal or external policies in favor or against the women, peace and security agenda, and what actual actions they have undertaken. The students did first global mapping and then selected 18 groups based on a mix of criteria like geographic location, control of territory, but also the type of orientation like ethnic, religious, and leftist organizations. And nevertheless, they found that the data available was very limited. And out of this grew the idea of a different approach, more participatory and closer to the action. The project we developed, the current one, is a pilot project to test this approach. It uses a participatory action research approach to get key conflict actors affected by or with influence on the conflict meaningfully involved to strengthen the participation and protection of women and girls in conflict areas. So we decided to do research on Myanmar as large parts of its territories are controlled and governed by various armed and political movements, particularly after the military coup in 2021. Because of this, we thought that was a particularly suited context for conducting in-depth participatory analysis and policy consultation to assess and encourage armed and political movements' efforts to enhance the rights of women and girls. In addition, as there are many women's rights organizations that are linked to these movements, we thought that they could represent suitably entry points for the analysis and for future advocacy and implementation work. As Véronique mentioned in her introduction, in this project, we worked with two ethnic resistance organizations, the KNU and the KMPP, with the support of two insider experts who were identified by these two organizations. Following the field research, interviews, and preparation of written and visual materials, we organized 3 regional dissemination events, one for each of the organization and one for civil society organization actors based in Thailand, and one global event during the Geneva Peace Week. So you can see in the chat box the link for the video we prepared. Today, we are sharing with you the findings of this research, but we will also hear more about the situations of women and girls, both in Myanmar and Yemen, from women who are directly trying to these situations. Thanks a lot, and I am offering to Véronique.
Many thanks, Beytul. I'm sure you have reasoned everyone's appetite for now hearing about the actual results of this pilot research. And so for this, I'm going to turn to our lead researcher, Zin Mar Phyo, who likes to be called Boke Boke. She's a journalist. She's also a women's rights activist, and she's been engaged in several participatory action research projects in areas controlled by ethnic armed organizations, also now called ethnic resistance organizations. And so, Boke Boke, why don't you explain to us the main findings of the research?
And thanks, Vero, and also thanks everyone for giving me this space to share our findings. Regarding our finding, both the KNU and KNPP have very similar experiences in terms of implementing the WPS agenda. Both groups have general understanding on gender and WPS, but both more emphasize on the importance of women participation rather than understanding on all WPS pillars as a whole agenda. And both movements do not have a specific policy and implementation on the WPS agenda, but they do engage with promoting of women's participation and protection in their territories, although they face various challenges in doing so. For example, in terms of participation, can you put some quotas for women's participation in its constitution? And also KNPP is conducting women's empowerment program and its decision on having more women candidates in their next Congress. However, in both groups, the number of women participation in the decision-making level are critically low. And the majority of women are mostly participating in implementation and activity levels, more as supporters rather than as the leaders. Now, in terms of protection, KNPP is in the process of reforming and building more systematic administration structure to have a better reach to women in its area. But KNU signed the deed of commitment on sexual violence and sensitive sexual violence, which contributed to basic awareness training within the KNU. And KNU also shows some efforts in reforming its Justice Department to be gender responsive and sensitive, including some developing process of women's protection laws. Here again, however, most of GBV cases are still ended with traditional practices in the village or township levels with ineffective action taken due to the practice of gender discrimination within the movement and also within the community. In fact, both movements depend to a large extent on the associated women's organization for any women-related issues in terms of women participation and women's protection, rather than implementing these on their own as their obligation. And KNU and KNPP share a lot of similarities in terms of challenges to policy development and implementation, along with limited technical and financial resources, the dominance of a conservative mindset and the presence of gender discrimination within both movements are found to be a great hindrance for both developing policy and implementation on women's participation and protection in their territories. In addition, the current political situation has also greatly impacted the existing limited process of promoting women's rights in both territories, because under the current political crisis, both organizations consider the women agenda as subordinate to the fighting. However, despite all of these challenges and limitations, the finding also shows several positive notes. For example, both movement leadership have some knowledge on the topics and also showed their willingness to engage on the WPS agenda, and also show their recognition the need for further improvement. So I think this is an indication that follow-up work is possible and also welcome. Yes.
Great. Many thanks, Boke Boke, for letting us know both about the areas of advancement and progress that you have found through the research and the remaining challenges that need to be tackled. So we'll now be hearing from a second perspective from Myanmar, from Sabe Phyu, who is a women's rights activist, a peace advocate. She's founding member of the Alliance for Promoting Women's Meaningful Participation in Myanmar's peace process. And since the coup, I understand, is now coordinating the coalition of women's human rights defenders. She's calling us from the US. That is her new home since the coup, right? So there's been conflict between different ethnic organizations and the government of Myanmar for many years, with a dramatic impact on the communities, including on women and girls. There has been a peace process initiated in 2016, but the military coup has stopped all peace efforts. And there is still a lot to be achieved to protect and promote women's rights, especially in the current phase of escalation. So I would love to hear your reaction to what you've heard from Boke Boke, and what would you see as areas of progress that you have seen, the situation now on the ground, and the main challenges that women and girls are facing in those territories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to take part in this event. Myanmar suffered a protracted civil war, and we have a first-hand experience of the suffering of war and conflict. Ethnic nationalities seeking to express their self-determination and autonomy led to a collision with the central authority, which has been suppressing their ethnic rights movement by use of force. The protracted conflict has slowed down the speed of human development, economic development, and has differently impacted on women and girls' rights and ability to achieve their highest potential. So that being said, I have witnessed an increased participation of and recognition of the importance of gender inclusion in Myanmar peace process through the nationwide ceasefire agreement NCA during the last decade of the partial opening, the semi-democratic phase of Myanmar. So women groups and organizations are working on inclusiveness in the peace and democratic process push for different avenues to open up space for minorities and traditionally marginalized people's participation. Even the war as waged in Kachin, where I came from, an Arakan state, while the NCA process was ongoing, showed the complexity of Myanmar's paradoxical peace initiatives. Related, there was a common goal towards supporting inclusiveness in Myanmar peace process as exhibited through the support from international development partners and the global drive for advancing the WPS agenda worldwide, as petty as that has been. Since the February 2021 failed coup, the situation has been dire. On one hand, we have been unprecedented levels of women and young girls' participation in the political process, including in leadership roles through staging of non-violence peaceful protests, through the civil disobedience movement, through humanitarian efforts. Eventually, some women joined the armed resistance as well. On the other hand, women continue to face discrimination within the movement, as Boke Boke said. Some are exposed to opportunistic sexual harassment, social cultural norms, continue to exclude women in public panels, or give tokenistic inclusion in the high-level decision-making process. Much worse, many women face gender-based violence and sexual violence as punishment for their political actions. Women and girls across Myanmar have been brutally assaulted with widespread arbitrary detention, sexual abuse of women and girls in detention, and well-documented extrajudicial killings. The junta security force use sexual violence as one of their interrogation tactics on women detainees. These atrocities and crimes are more than random, isolated acts by rude soldiers. Their widespread and systematic nature indicates a structural pattern. Impunity for those heinous crimes is systematically entrenched, forcing ethnic women to live with their trauma and carry on without justice, accountability, counseling, or resources. Knowing the degree of torture and brutality junta forces inflict on those who resist them, some women have committed suicide to avoid arrest. Although they play a critical role in advancing development, peace and security and humanitarian action efforts, women human rights defenders and peace builders are increasingly at risk and face targeted attacks, gender-based hate speech, and incitement to violence. There is global evidence demonstrating a strong connection between protection and participation within the WPS framework. GBV and lack of protection has been identified as two of the chief barriers for women's mobility, participation in public space, and stifling their aspirations to enter politics and public affairs. When fellow women human rights defenders endure sexual violence, the signal of the wider public is that if you conduct such an activity, the same fate could fall on you. After the failed coup, the WPS challenges are widespread across the country, as are the number of conflict zones. WPS promotion in conflict area is difficult, as there is a lack of proper protection mechanisms in the event of GBV incidents and other violations against women. In active armed conflict area, it is very hard to achieve any of the pillars of the WPS, as there have been heavy airstrikes, a sheer lack of security, and arson attacks carried out by the military forces. And this has pushed people to be in a survival mood. Currently, they do not think any of these protection mechanisms and frameworks apply to them, and they feel utterly abandoned by the international community and frameworks. However, when the active armed conflict pauses, there are spaces to advance the WPS agenda in the ethnic resistant organizations control areas through gender awareness raising activities, advocacy on the need to enhance protection mechanisms, and to create and share spare spaces with women and gender minorities for gender inclusion. Thank you.
Many thanks, May, for highlighting both the areas of progress that have been made during the period of the NCA and the very dire situation that you see now in Myanmar, and the extra risks or extra burdens, right, that women are facing, both because of the violence, because of their activism, and because of structural and cultural norms. And also for linking participation and protection and how one needs the other. So we will now, for a while, move a little bit away from Myanmar and go to Yemen to hear a few words from Dr. Najwa Fadhl, who is a member of the Advisory Committee for the International Women, Peace and Security Agenda and advisor to the President of the Southern Transitional Council, the STC of Yemen. And so Dr. Najwa, when we see her on the screen, the STC controls the city of Aden in Yemen and other parts of the south of Yemen, with millions of women living in areas that are severely affected by armed conflict. So we would love to ask you what you have seen as progress in terms of the rights of women and girls in those territories. What kind of steps or decisions your movement has taken to protect women and girls, to promote their participation in decision-making, in politics, and in the peace process, and what are main challenges for women and girls to enjoy their rights in Yemen and in the south. I hope Dr. Najwa is with us. I'm not seeing her on my screen, but maybe the colleagues can help bring her forward. Dr. Najwa? Let's try it one more minute. Otherwise, I'll turn back to our other panelists, and then we'll try her a little bit later. Okay, maybe let's first then go back to our panelists for a second round of brief questions, and then we'll go back to Yemen. So in this second part of the panel, we would like to look a little bit ahead and to ask you what could be done to further promote the rights of women and girls. So first to Boke Boke, you have had the opportunity to present some of the recommendations coming out of the research to the leadership of both organizations, the KNU and the KNPP. So could you maybe tell us in a few words what those recommendations were that were directed to them, but also to the international community, and maybe what reactions you have seen so far? Thank you.
Thank you. We have detailed the concrete recommendations.
Hello, sorry for interruption.
Yes, please. Is Dr. Najwa with us now? There she is. All right. So, okay, I'm so sorry, Boke Boke. If you can keep your answer for a few minutes, and we'll turn to Dr. Najwa first. So, Dr. Najwa, could you share with us in a few words what the situation is in the south of Yemen now? That would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
أسمعكي واضح تسمعيني؟
سامعينك دكتورة. Yes, now she can hear you.
So, Dr. Najwa, the floor is yours. And as a reminder to everyone, please select the English channel if you want to listen to her in English. Thank you. You have the floor.
First, I am very happy to be with you here today in this webinar. I would like to share with you what women and girls suffer in the wars and conflicts in Yemen, especially in the south of Yemen. I can give a short brief about Southern women. They suffered a lot even before the war, because the regime, or the previous regime before 2015, practiced all forms of psychological and physical abuse against women in the south who were demanding freedom and freedom of opinion and all personal freedoms. So there was an attack on them. They faced a lot of threats. They were excluded and marginalized. I'm talking here, of course, about women of the South. The war started in 2015, and it multiplied the suffering of Southern women because they had to endure wars. We all know that the main victims of wars and conflicts are women. Circumstances or exceptional circumstances came to be after the war, but I can say that Southern women have the power and the strength to overcome all of these difficulties and obstacles. Of course, more than 3,000 women were kicked out of their jobs. They were obliged to wear the hijab or cover up by the regime. This was required by the regime. And then the Transitional Council, the Southern Transitional Council, which was created by the resistance in the South, gave some freedoms to women so that they can work and express their opinions. Yet, as women in the south of Yemen, we are still suffering from the tribal system that is observed in Yemen, which is biased against women. They canceled the family law that gave women a lot of rights. Yet, before 2015, they stopped the implementation of this law even before the war, because they took into consideration the fatwas of the clergymen and religious authorities in the north who were working against women. The law used to prevent polygamy, but this is no longer observed in cases of separation or divorce. The house or the place of residence was for the women and the children, but now this all has been revoked. Several fatwas were issued from the religious authorities, and consequently, the place of residence belongs to the man, and the woman has to leave with her children and go live with her family. So this is a form of violence against women, and Southern women have been suffering from the religious fatwas for a long time. And because they were practicing, or because political Islam was dominating in Yemen, and it was all against women. Southern women also. Southern women enjoyed some kind of stability and independence to a certain extent, but unfortunately, after the 22nd of May, women have become very marginalized and excluded. So today, we say that in the Transitional Council gave women some freedoms and engaged her in the agenda of peace and security. Now we can see our women under the Transitional Council. I'm showing you a photo of women training in the protection in the security forces. This month we graduated many women to become members of the security forces to protect establishments. So the Transitional Council is very keen on engaging women in maintaining security and peace, and give them the freedom to choose their place of work. Nonetheless, we still say that this is not enough. We demand the implementation of Resolution 1325 to give women all the rights, and we called in various correspondences our leadership in the Transitional Council to promote the participation of women in decision making and in building a civil state. We also aspire in the Southern Transitional Council to have a civil government that is not affected by political Islam and any other regime that allows for religious fatwas that are biased against women. The women of the south of Yemen, we are still demanding the participation of women in the political life and all other fields, in diplomacy, military. These are our demands. We know that there are deep-rooted traditions and customs in Yemen, and we know that the societies in the north and south of Yemen are patriarchal societies. We are aware of that, but the leadership of the Southern Transitional Council listens to us, they listen to our opinions, and they respect our demands and our suggestions, and they respect women's rights. We are working now on reinstating the family affairs law, which was revoked, so that we can guarantee women the freedom to choose and guarantee their rights. This law is the cornerstone that protects women's rights in Yemen. And there is a decision that unfortunately affect our sisters in the northern governments. It was issued in the last July, and it prevents women from traveling outside the country without a guardian, a male guardian. We call on human rights organizations and the UN and all other activists to work against this to advocate against this decision, because it is unimaginable that in the 21st century, with all the technology and developments, we see that women in Yemen cannot travel without a male guardian, or to prevent their, to deny them their freedom of mobility. In the South, we always demand for more respect for the right of women, but there are always those who try to use Islam to issue fatwas that would restrict the freedoms of women in a humiliating and demeaning way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Najwa, for reminding us how much the war is affecting the rights and the freedoms of women, but also the tribal system and other drivers of infringement to their rights, but also for giving some examples of areas of progress in allowing women's participation, including in the security sector, thanks to the STC. So thank you so much. I will now go back to Boke Boke. Thanks for your patience. So going back to the research that has been conducted in Myanmar, looking forward, what main recommendations would you like to summarize and to share with our participants today? Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
ကျမတို့ကနေပြီးတော့ခါမှာပေါ့နော်ဒီထဲမှာလည်းပဲเนาะကျမတို့အချိန်ပေါ့နော်အသေးစိတ်ကိုလည်းကျမတို့ကနေလုပ်ထားပြီးသားလေးရှိပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ကျမတို့ကအချိန်ကြောင့်မို့လို့တွေ့ရှိချက်တွေရဆိုခဲ့လို့ရှိရင်တော့ဒါကပေါ့
أول شيء تنفيذ أجندة المرأة والأمن والسلام في ميانمار ويجب أن تكون
working on women's rights as advocates and also the international communities that as supporters. So as the main obligated actors, the ERO's leaders need to give full responsibility in implementing gender inclusion and women peace and security agenda within their movement and their territory as their obligation. And also they must take on necessary action plans for more effective, systematic, and also sustainable implementation of WPS in their territories. And ERO must give or continue more efforts in developing policy and in reviewing and reforming the existing policy and regulations in order to overcome the gaps and challenges which hinder the implementation of women peace and security agenda and also gender inclusion. And ERO must build internal capacity building and also awareness raising on gender and the WPS agenda within the organization systematically, as well as creating a support system for women within ERO in order to effectively promote women's participation and women's accessing justice. And these efforts need to be addressed and integrated at all levels within the organization and at all levels of political process as part of the political agenda by EROs. For the international community, they must effectively take the roles of providing technical and financial contributions to EROs and also its associated CSOs. For example, like providing support for engaging dialogues, for capacity building and awareness raising process, and for policy reviewing and developing process, and for creating support system and spaces where ERO women can extend their political experiences. So, but here, importantly, the support must be longer term, and also all the engagements need to be closely work coordinate with local CSO, which are closely working with EROs for the issues of women's rights, gender equality, and women peace and security agenda.
Great. Thanks a lot for pointing to those required actions by EROs on the one hand, and for the listeners who are not familiar with Myanmar, EROs refers to ethnic resistance organizations, which is the current term used for most armed groups in ethnic areas. So May, you've heard some of Boke Boke's recommendations. I would love to hear from you as well, what you would see as areas of action, including by male leaders of those movements. What could they do to better promote women's rights? Thank you.
Thank you. Genuinely thinking about how the leadership see the gender issue is needed. And there is no doubt that the ERO possess greater gender awareness as evidenced by higher percentage of women's representation in the EROs when they came for the peace dialogue in the previous government administration. This is due to the sustained and concerted efforts which ethnic women's organizations have relentlessly approached representation, backdoor advocacy, quiet diplomacy, and sometimes public demonstrations. So we have yet to achieve the level of substantive equality if we look to the leadership composition in military operations, administrations, and management. That is a long way to go. Currently, we all know that protection mechanisms amount to next to nothing in some of the emerging armed forces when women groups attempted to raise about the need. The leadership sometimes see it as outside the realm of important matters such as military operations, strategies, and territorial control. This kind of mindset can be seen as lock-in. Boke also already mentioned it. It is important once the revolution is over that women and girls are there to defend the gains made thus far in the nation building process, their role in the change process and transforming the conflict. To do good documentation of women roles and voices, stories are needed in order to stake their claim to their rightful place in governance. We have seen so far competent, capable, and creative women's leadership in this revolution. If women do not talk about their roles and contributions, it will be overlooked. Another thing is to challenge the power relationships within the organizations to ensure democratic practice when it comes to gender inclusion. So putting in place systems, policies, and processes that guarantee gender equality is another critical piece of the puzzle. Women peace builders and human rights defenders were specifically targeted not only in Myanmar, but also worldwide, including through sexual violence and harassment as a form of reprisal to exclude them from public life. There needs to be a system in place with multi-sectoral service to accompany it to ensure safe and confidential reporting of incidents without having to fear reprisal. On the participation front, go beyond a supply-driven capacity building processes for women leaders. We also have to work on changing the organizational culture, processes, and practice to a welcoming one of gender inclusion. Development partners can support this work by continuing to strengthen women rights organizations that are working to change the behavior of top-level male leadership and by requiring their gender inclusion efforts to be scaled up. It is necessary to educate male leaders that gender inclusion is the right of women to participate, and that this comes with different views and perspectives that are a foundation to imagining a new and better society. Gender equality is not just a women issue, it affects everyone in society. Women, men, and people of all genders benefit when there is gender equality, as we all know, and it allows for the fair and equal treatment of all individuals. In building the fair democratic Myanmar, the work must be strengthened and supported. Thank you.
Thank you for those concrete ideas. As a researcher myself, I very much like the one about documenting stories of women's leaderships and to inspire others. That's very important, but the other ones as well, indeed. Maybe if I can briefly turn to Dr. Najwa, maybe if I could ask you a question about the international community, since there's many representatives of international bodies or ministries or INGOs here in this call. What would you say would be the role that international actors can play to support women and girls enjoying their rights in South Yemen? Thank you. If you can unmute yourself.
على للأمم المتحدة والمجلس الأمن.
I think what we ask the international factors and the international actors and the UN, they have a lot to do if they really want to interfere to help women and girls enjoy their rights in the south of Yemen. Both in the north and south of Yemen, we suffer from conflicts between men. We are suffering from the conflicts between men. Therefore, we demand that women take at least 50% of the leadership. The women in the north and the south of women. Women are restricted to certain tasks and positions and responsibilities. And I think that we would benefit from pressure to encourage the participation of women in peace negotiations and to refuse to engage in any negotiations if women were not represented. We always say that societies cannot be built in the right way if half of the society is not there on the table, and these conflicts between men are affecting us all. We hope, or we would like to see negotiations between the women of the south and north, and we asked this of the gender officer of the UN when she came to visit. Since the man couldn't find a solution, we said you should give us a chance to build our capacities when it comes to negotiations, and we believe that we can find good solutions. We think we are capable of succeeding where men failed. So in answer to your question, we ask the international actors to try to impose pressure to give us that chance. We would also like to see more effective laws for that maintain the interests of women. If the international society or the international actors want to interfere, maybe they can convince the actors for more favorable laws to women. Thank you very much.
Thank you for pointing at the need for pressure, advocacy, and capacity as well to allow women to take full roles where they are due, right? Especially in the peace process and at the table. To avoid what I think May was referring before as token representation, right? So I think at this point, I would like to bring back Danielle, our first speaker, if she's still with us, in order to hear from the perspective of the German Foreign Office, maybe after hearing those perspectives from Myanmar, from Yemen, what you would like to see for the future role of the international community, policy and donor community in supporting women's protection and participation in areas controlled by armed movements, and can actually those movements be direct interlocutors of the WPS community?
Thanks, Véronique. So I think the first thing I need to say is that the position of the German government is that there is, for example, already a sufficiently strong normative framework in place. Could we use stronger language? Of course. And we are, as a German government, we're definitely working very much on that. But overall, the focus of the international community is and should be on implementation. And for us, we take a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we focus on supporting women peace builders. And on the other hand, we focus on preventing conflict-related sexual violence and on supporting survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, especially in areas where CRSV is used both as a weapon of war and as a crime of opportunity. We just think that there can't be full, equal, and meaningful participation of women if they don't feel, or women in all their diversity, and of course other potential survivors. If they don't feel safe, they don't feel secure, they can't act if they don't feel safe and secure. So that's why this is kind of our focus of our work. And we think that there is a strong need for the donor community to work together, so that there are no counterproductive efforts, that efforts are not shattered in many tiny initiatives. And the focus must be on those who are, to put it bluntly, in the forefront of the line. So focus must be on women peace builders, and the focus must be on survivors. They are the ones who do most of the work, and so they should be the ones deciding what they need. And we're here, and it's our privilege in our position to support them in these endeavors. So for us, it's very important that the ones that are doing the actual work are supported, and that they feel supported, and that they know that they can rely on the vast support of the donor community. So that's kind of, I think, our main position.
Great, thanks a lot, Danielle. A reminder to everyone that we still have 15 minutes to go, so you can post more questions in the Q&A box. So maybe while waiting for more questions to come in, I will turn to Boke Boke and Beytul, if you want to add a little bit. You have both mentioned that in this research we've used a participatory methodology by involving insiders as experts and conducting the research with them. So maybe Boke Boke, would you like to give us a few hints into what the advantages of that methodology was? So how did it make the findings more solid and more locally owned? Maybe what did you see by using this methodology of working with insiders as opposed to observing them from the outside?
Yes, actually, what I want to say is currently in the current political context, it is really difficult to do such research. Why all people, leaders, both movements are really busy with under the political crisis, including OCSO. But however, since we work with insider experts, one from KNU and one from KMPP, we could successfully manage to do the interviews and peer research, insight research in practice, because the one thing is trust building, because first one is we know each other, and also those insider experts, they have a good relationship and they understand their situation and their organization, so that even though the leadership are busy, then we can negotiate their limited schedule and something like that. So we can go into the peer research. And also another one is the security. For example, like in the current political context, you know, the traveling is really strict for even within the local people. Traveling to the control area is almost impossible because of the ongoing fighting and shelling from the SAC, something like that. But however, with the support of the movement leadership, it is a lot easier for us to conduct the peer research too. So another one is the main important thing is local ownership. local ownership, because we do our own research as our own situation, and we with our local people. Then including the movement leaders and also the leaders from CSO movement, they feel like that this they have more willingness to share the information, and also to support for the including the arrangement, communication, everything. So I think it is really important for through local insider experts to do those such important research.
Great, thanks a lot, Boke Boke. I don't know, Beytul, whether you would like to add anything on the methodology from the perspective of Berghof and Fight for Humanity?
Yes, very shortly, as Boke Boke covered already very good. Very shortly, I can say that this research has two phases. The first phase was collecting data and analysis with research, desk research and field research. Then the second phase is dissemination phase of the findings in different events, like I mentioned in Thailand with 3 events, and 1 event during the peace, Geneva Peace Week, and now what we are doing now in this webinar, and also dissemination through a research report, policy brief that we will publish very soon, hopefully, as well as a short video documentary of some interviews, as I mentioned. Soon, or maybe now, you see the link of the video in chat box. Boke Boke, as a lead researcher, she conducted interviews with the help of insider experts in the territory of KNU and KMPP. Total 47 interviews conducted with leadership, with associated civil society groups, community women, and the leaders from women's organization in Myanmar, and external experts. So over to you, Véronique.
Thank you. All right, let me now, we still have a few minutes. Let me turn to maybe Dr. Najwa. There was a question from someone from the audience asking whether you think the programs that are implemented in Yemen, I guess especially from the international community, whether you think that these programs are aligned with the local values and the local cultures of your country? Especially around women's rights, right? So do you think that women's rights programs that are coming in and that are supported by countries like Germany and others, are they in tune, are they aligned, are they adjusted to the local needs and the local culture? Thanks.
Of course, I would like to greet our friends in Germany who actually welcomed us during the last 2 months. We were guests in Germany, and I would like to thank them for their hospitality. Of course, the programs and projects that flow in from international organizations or UN, they almost never take into consideration the cultural characteristics or the cultural nature of Yemen. The laws, the implemented laws, the religious customs, these have to be taken into consideration. I'm sorry, they take into consideration these laws and these traditions. They do take them into consideration, and we thank them for that, because they are sensitive towards our culture. Many of the programs were implemented, but implemented successfully, but sometimes we work on projects, but sometimes they do not meet the immediate needs because of poverty and because of the circumstances of war. There are more immediate needs. There are more immediate needs. This is not to say that the implemented projects are not important. They are important, but maybe at a later stage. So they propose a project or there's a proposal for a project and the implementation starts. However, it does not meet the priorities. Maybe they can be implemented later when the circumstances are better. But again, I would like to stress that the UN and the international actors are very sensitive towards our culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Let me turn maybe one last question to May. You've been asked, or we've been asked, the fact that in Myanmar, ethnic resistance organizations exist both as armed groups and as local governance actors, right? So can it be possible to mainstream WPS in the security sector and in the justice sector of taking the examples of KNU and KNPP, but maybe also other EROs? Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. So not only KNU or KNPP or the EROs alone, like the local governance body as well as the, whatever government, who call themselves as a government. So if they want to mainstream WPS in security and justice sector, the first thing is, it's awareness, within their governance body. And, it has to be, aware of, like why WPS is needed and how WPS could be strengthened within their system. And then, like part of the WPS, of course, protection, preventions are, some of the key pillars. And, they need to set up complaint and reporting mechanisms, for the protection, prevention, within their system. And then they have to focus developing on how they will respond, the WPS issues as a strategic, issues. So they need to develop WPS strategy or, like a policy guidelines that include concrete actions, because like a strategy or policy without action is just a paper. So they need to have, practical complaint and reporting mechanisms, like the strategy to address specific peace and security issues within their governance, within the security and justice sector, and also outlining, what will be the concrete actions, how they were going to fund it, how they will monitor, these kind of things will be needed, not only in the EROs, but also, in every local governance body. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Maybe Boke Boke, anything you'd like to add from the research? Because that's one of the sectors that you've covered, right? Looking at how in the security, in the military of those EROs, women's rights and trainings as well should be conducted and targeted, right?
And also another one to add with Mami, the Beytul, that in the area of the region of KNP, with the movement of KNP and KNU, the community, the CSO women leaders and the community women, when we interviewed, they said that even though they are like the EROs, but they see them as their government. And also the system of the ERO, like justice system, and also like security sector, the ERO is more effective for them rather than the mainstream, the previous or the current one. In terms of the languages and in terms of their supporting system or something like that. So I think it is really possible for the KNU and KNPP to mainstream the WPS agenda within their own structure, because as Mami said that they act as the government in their territory.
Thank you. Great. I see more questions coming, but we wanted to give a couple minutes at the end to talk about the next steps. So I think we'll have to stop the round here, and I'll give you the floor, Beytul, before concluding. If you would like to maybe give us a taste of what are the next steps in the project, and maybe again reemphasize the products that are going to be coming out soon.
Thank you, Véronique. So I will talk about a little bit policy applications for the women, peace and security community and the next steps. So although the current study focuses on two armed and political movements in Myanmar, we believe that its applications are relevant beyond this single context and can benefit the women, peace and security community and other policy actors worldwide. So notably, we found that armed and political movements do engage with the women, peace and security agenda directly and indirectly. They can have an interest in participating in research on the women, peace and security agenda and beyond. That case serve as a baseline for further actions. They can be positively influenced by both internal and external factors and actors, such as progressive leaders, youth movements, women's organizations, and donors. So in short, we believe that it's important to advance on other working in the areas under the control of armed and political movements to support the full implementation of the women, peace and security agenda and to promote the protection and participation rights of women and girls in these areas. And we see that it's possible to do so. So we encourage you to read the research report when we publish, hopefully very soon. The applications beyond the specific Myanmar context will be further developed in a policy brief that we will also publish in January. Then the research will continue in 2023 with a focus on implementation for Myanmar and on new research in the context of Yemen. We would like to thank the GFFO for making it possible. The aim of this new research project is to support the full implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda by providing new knowledge and insights to policymakers in Myanmar, Yemen, and globally to the armed and political movements themselves, as well as to women's organizations operating in the areas under their control on policies and practices of armed and political movements relating to the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So in Myanmar, the focus will be on undertaking a capacity and advocacy dialogue with the KNU and KMPP for the implementation of the recommendations. For Yemen, the focus will be on conducting a participatory action research similar to what we did in Myanmar with three armed and political movements from Yemen, from south on and north. Then the findings will be disseminated with written and visual materials in Yemen in areas controlled by them. And finally, we will organize hopefully a workshop for women, peace and security practitioners to discuss the finding from the 5 cases and identify ways for more effective promotion of protection and participation rights of women and girls in areas governed by armed and political movements globally. Thank you, Véronique. Over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Beytul, for giving us a taste of the next steps. So I think we're going to have to round it up now, but there's been many important points that have been raised across the two contexts of Myanmar and Yemen. I think we've heard that there is a strong link indeed between participation and protection, like in the title of the event, no participation without protection. And I would say the reverse is also true. We've heard about the importance of working both with women and with men. Women's organizations are crucial, but without male leaders on board, we will not advance much. We have seen that armed and political movements can be actors in this process in both countries. And what we heard from May as well at the end is how strategies for WPS are needed, not only policy guidelines, but concrete guidelines, right? So policies without action that don't lead us anywhere. So thanks for those very strong messages from all of you. We have now put in the chat some of the products that are already available, and we recommend that you check our websites to see the upcoming reports. There's going to be also a short survey for you to take for Yemeni purposes to hear what impressions you have from the event and the topic. And so I think now it's time to thank all the panelists for their time, the participants for being with us in this very busy time of the year. I wish you all a very nice rest of the year, and for those who are concerned, a wonderful holiday season. So thanks a lot and bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.